ladies, I'm Brittany with Stitches of Love Quilting, and in this video tutorial we're going to make our adorable Girl Power Pincushion. This is the free welcome kit you receive when you join our Girl Power block of the month. So this version of the tutorial is going to be for those of you using your embroidery machine to complete the applique. So every month, again, this is your free pincushion, but on your actual quilt every month your applique will be stitched in the hoop of your embroidery machine, and then at the end you'll assemble your quilt using your sewing machine. So let's get started. So when you open your cute little bag that comes, you're gonna have your background, your background fabric, your backing, and your border fabric, and then you have all your prefused laser cut applique pieces. You'll have your pattern and a full-size placement guide. Again, this is a pincushion for your block of the months. Every month they'll be differently formatted. Of course, you'll have a larger placement guide. So everything is numbered. You also have the reverse pieces in case you want to make it again. You can always use your own supplies and trace and cut your applique pieces. So let's get started. We always recommend that you read through your pattern completely before you begin. So in your pattern, you're going to see a reminder that this is your free welcome gift. We do a reminder of what kind of thread we like to use for this welcome kit. And of course, for all your embroidery throughout, you're going to use 40 weight rayon thread in the needle of your embroidery machine. You're going to use, for that needle, we recommend a 7511. This is just the standard size that comes with your embroidery machine. It's the standard thread that you would use on any kind of project on your embroidery machine. And then we pair that with a pre-wound white bobbin. Simple white bobbin by the, the bobbin that matches your brand of machine. You can call your machine dealer. You can also pick these up online at embroidery machine store supplies places, and they're just a simple basic white bobbin. Then a reminder of how to access your embroidery files. You're going to download your embroidery files every month, and then you'll be able to put them onto your machine. It's a zip file, so you want to know how to unzip the file, choose the right file format for your machine. For example, I use a PES on my brother. And then, of course, if you ever have questions, you can always reach out and contact us. Click on support on our website. You can submit a ticket. We have an absolutely amazing team answering questions. And if they don't already know the answer, they just get myself or Julie, and we answer for you. So nothing we can't answer. We got you covered. Then, of course, a reminder of who we are. That's me. I'm Brittany, behind the camera. My mom, Julie, and then Amy, they are the designers of the quilt. So this quilt is based off the original line art of Amy Brucken. She is a wonderful cross-stitch designer and artist. And then Julie adapts her art into the format that you see in your pattern so that it can be used for applique. Super fun for us all to work together. Amy is so creative, and it's really fun to get to use her art in the quilts. Then let's get to fabric prep. I'm going to start giving you some tips now. So we're going to put the pattern aside. Reminder to read through your pattern. And I'll go on and say this. When I am reading through my pattern, I organize my pieces in order of appearance. And I put them in cute little piles, which I'll show you. And then I always organize my thread in order of appearance. Now the thread kit for the Girl Power quilt has 20 thread colors. It's gorgeous. I've pulled out just the colors that are used in this little pin cushion for this video. So I always go on and organize those, which we'll talk about again in just a second. So first up, my tip that I want to start with is when you get your block every month, or when you have this pin cushion, I like to do just a light starch on all of my fabric to prep. So I'm just going to show you. I like to starch fabric because I think it makes it easier to work with. And we get the question a lot, how much do you starch? Well, if I'm doing just a piece quilt that doesn't have applique, I quite frankly make my fabric be where it almost feels like paper. Like I'll soak it in my utility sink with literally a gallon jug of starch that I pour in with warm water. Right now I'm just gonna use spray. There's all kinds of cool fancy sprays, whichever one you like. Just use that one throughout your quilt. I like just something like this. So I'm just gonna do, oh look, it's clogged. I'm gonna do just a light spraying, and then I just iron it dry. And that is how I starch my fabric. Now, when you're starching this, I wouldn't use my little embroidery iron. I would probably be on my real ironing board. But for purposes of this video, we're right here. So see, I'm just gonna iron it dry. And that way, it's a lot easier when I piece my fabric. Everything is like the same consistency. Now, do not ever starch or press your applique pieces because we've already done that for you. So when we're making all of your pieces for all of your blocks every month, we prefuse all of the pieces with Sulky Perfect applique, and then it's heat pressed with a big giant industrial heat press, and then it's put onto our lasers and it cuts it out to the perfect shape, right? So later in the video, we're gonna starch and press the rest of our fabric. So this background piece, as it says, you're gonna trim it later. It's ready to use for our embroidery machine. You can go on and cut your border and backing, this floral print. I'm gonna do it later in the video when we need it. And then what's not included in your kit is your fusible batting. You just need a couple little pieces, and that's gonna go on the back and the front to line our little pincushion. So let's get started with the embroidery part. First up, we're gonna load our embroidery file on the machine, which I've done. We're gonna load our machine with our white thread. That's what we're gonna use to stitch. Now, I need to go on and organize my applique pieces. That's the one thing we haven't done yet. So I'm gonna show you my trick for organizing the applique pieces. So when it comes to you every month, I'll set this aside. I simply take my placement guide, and I like to write on the back of my pieces with a Sharpie. You can also use like another kind of like little Sharpie, but I like a fine point Sharpie. A Pigma pen works to write on the back of it too, but not quite as well. So again, Sharpie's my favorite. And so we're gonna organize our pieces by numbering them. So you'll notice that a few just need snipped free. Sometimes with really small pieces, we put it in a bigger piece so it's easier to grip when we're kitting, and also so you don't lose it either. And so you can choose to number your pieces either way. You can put your fabric face up on your placement guide, or you can put it the fusible side up on the reversed applique pieces to number it, right? So you can do it either way. I tend to use my reverse way because then the side I write on is facing up. Makes sense to me, right? So I'm just gonna snip these pieces free. And again, I'm just simply laying them in place. If you happen to be making this quilt for a granddaughter or a niece or someone in your family, and they live nearby, and maybe they're just like kind of getting interested in sewing, this is a fun little step to have them help with, getting all prepped and organized. And then this is her little face. These two little circles are for her overalls. And I'm just putting them in place, and in just a second, I'm gonna number them, and then we'll read the pattern together, and we're gonna put them in order of appearance. You'll see what I mean. This makes it so organized. If you spend a few minutes up front prepping, then once you get to sewing on your embroidery machine, I mean, you don't have to think about anything. It's great. I love it. Where's this little guy? Here he is. And so you just do a little snip. You might be asking, what are these awesome scissors? If you don't already have them, I highly recommend them. They're Karen K. Buckley Perfect Scissors. They're serrated and they're sharp all the way to the point. So when you cut, they cut all the way to the point. Really, really nice. Okay, so now let's number these pieces. I'll pull this up a little bit so you can see. So first up, we have number 7. This is number 3. And I'm writing on the paper backing of the piece, right? So I'm not hurting the piece at all. And this way we know what piece is what. And here's 8 and 10. And then number 1, number 2, number 4. Okay, so now I'm gonna read my pattern, and I'm gonna make little piles of how these pieces of fabric are gonna be used. So I can see that the first pieces we're gonna use are 1, 2, and 3. So I'm gonna pick up 1, 2, 3, and I've made a pile. The next step where I'm going to use pieces, it's just going to be numbers 4 and 5. So here's number 4, here's number 5. Next little pile. Then we move on. The next piece will just be number 6. After that, we need 7, 8, and 10. So 7, 8, and 10 in a little pile. And then last but not least, 9 and 11. And I just, on the side, as you can see, I've read through the order of appearance, and I've made my cute little piles that coincide to my steps. So my first pile coincides with steps 6 and 7. I'm sorry, with 5 and 6. Then 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, and 14. So I have my pieces ready to go. The next thing I'm gonna do to prep, and I'm going really in depth in this first tutorial, just so you kind of understand how our patterns are written and what you need to do to get started. When you don't have someone like me talking, you'll be able to do this in just like a minute at your sewing machine or at your embroidery machine. The next thing is I put my threads in order. So our thread order is going to be, of course, we're starting with white to do all of our placement lines as notated in step 3. We're going to leave that on through all of these steps. Then we start notating when we're going to have color changes. So we're going to have 1056, then 1179 taupe. Then we'll turn the page. We have 1307, 1177, and then 1005 black. So that's what we're going to do on our embroidery machine. So let's get started with the embroidery process. And then again, after that, I'll give you some tips on assembly. So let me clip my pattern up to the side. So, and I like to have this out as well. I reference my placement guide as I'm putting my pieces on. It just gives me a reminder of what I'm doing, and I think that's perfectly fine. So I like to have, I clip them up next to me on either side so I can see them. And again, make sure your machine is ready with your white thread and your hoop. I will tell you, for this starter, we can use a smaller hoop than we're using every month. So for blocks 1 through 12, we're gonna use an 8x12 hoop because of the size of the block that we're making. For this little starter, it's much smaller, so you can use your 8x8 hoop or something around that size. And a good trick to know if your hoop is the right size, by the way, is when you have your hoop on your machine, or at least this works on my machine, I believe it works for everyone. If you put the file on your machine, it's not going to appear if you don't have a hoop that works, or it's going to highlight a bigger hoop that is available that maybe you don't have, but you can always get. And again, for your blocks 1 through 12, we have a test file. So if you're watching this and you're like, oh, I'm not sure if my hoop's gonna work, download that test file. It's free, and it simply gives you 2 big outlines so you know if your hoop is going to work. Okay, so let's load that white thread and have our machine stitch the very first step for us. Okay, so in your hoop, what you should have now is a perfect little, or almost a perfect square. It's actually a rectangle by just 1/4 of an inch. You're gonna have your stitched area, and you're simply gonna take your background fabric, plop it on. Easy peasy. You just wanna make sure that it's covering all 4 stitched lines. This is a Dainty Daisy print. It is not directional, so that is very nice. You never have to worry about the direction of the fabric. So I'm just gonna use a little bit of tape. You can also use your sew tights if you wanna use that, these cute little magnets that hold fabric in your hoop. I love using those. For whatever reason, I've reached for tape and I'm using tape. This is actually like medical tape. It's 3M transport tape. You can order it online from Amazon. And you get like a ton of rolls that last for a million years. And then we carry the sew tights. They're so nice, the little magnets. When you use these, just make sure, of course, you put it where it's gonna be above your stitch line. Don't like put it where your machine is about to stitch. Same with the tape. I like to put my tape where I'm not gonna have it stitch over itself because that's just a little harder to pull off. So again, we're gonna keep the white thread on the machine, and what's gonna stitch next, it's gonna do 1 rectangle that's ultimately gonna be our trim line or a guide for when we trim. It's also gonna hold it in place, and it's gonna give us our first 3 applique outlines. Okay, so you have your 3 outlines stitched, and we're gonna begin putting our pieces in place. So piece number 1, the most important thing when you're putting your pieces in place is that you take just a second and make sure you accurately have them within the stitched outline. If you are not careful on this step, you'll end up with a little wibbly wobbly one way or the other, and you'll notice that when it's stitched. So simply put it in place and you're good to go. And this fabric right here is a paparazzi dot. I think it makes such a fun hair. It's used a lot throughout the quilt because this print, it kind of reads like a solid, but it also gives you that texture of the tone-on-tone print, which I think is really fun. You'll notice when I'm ironing my pieces down, it doesn't take very long, just a few seconds, and your piece is ironed perfectly in place. And then here, you'll notice I just sort of go around and I check all my sides and make sure my piece is in place before I give it a press. So there we go. Now we'll continue on with white thread for our next round of applique outlines. Okay, so now it's time to iron on 2 more pieces. We have piece number 4, which is the top of her hair. And again, make sure it's perfectly in place all the way across before you begin ironing. There we go. And now, oh my gosh, look at this super cute floral. I would wear a shirt out of this fabric. That is adorable. This is a really cute print. And again, just get it right in place. The edge of both sleeves lines up perfectly with the edge of the stitched outline, by the way. So this is a very easy piece to get in place. And also when we trim our block, this is gonna be the edge, the 2 edges that we start with. So now back onto the arm of your machine for our next step. All right, we have our outline for the overalls. The base of her overalls. Is this not the cutest little stripe? It's got like little wiggle lines. Oh my gosh, adorable. And line this up. It goes right in the corner. Perfect. Give it a little press. And then you know the drill. On to the next steps. All right, so we have 3 more outlines on this step. First up is our cute little pocket. Piece number 7. Right in place. And then our 2 circles for 8 and 10. Fun fact, they're the exact same size circle. So on this particular piece, it doesn't matter which one you put where because they're the same. And throughout the quilt, sometimes there's circles that are exactly the same and sometimes they're not. I always make sure to notate that in the video, but also, of course, you would find out when you're numbering your piece. It either would or would not fit in the outline, right? Okay, so now continuing on to the next step. Alrighty, so now we're putting our final 2 applique pieces in place. So we have piece number 9. These are the little tops of her overalls, holding them up, the little straps. So piece number 9, and then piece number 11. Oop, I was holding it upside down. There we go. Right in place, so cute like. And so now what you've done is use your embroidery machine and your cute little iron and your awesome pre-fused laser cut applique pieces, and you've built your entire applique in the hoop of your machine. So now your hard work is done. That was the hardest thing you're gonna do. Now all you have to do are change your thread colors for each step. So I'm going to take my hoop on and off the arm of the machine, and we're gonna talk about the thread color changes in the video. For you at home, just keep your hoop on the arm of your machine, and all you have to do is change your thread colors. So the first color we're going to load will be for her hair, and it is 1056 medium tawny tan. Alrighty, let's take a look. Our hair is stitched. It looks flawless. She's having a good hair day. So now we're going to do our next thread color change, and we are changing to 1179 taupe. And what we'll stitch now will be the little cheeks, the side of her face, and then the 2 little buckles on her overalls. And now her little face and her little buckles are stitched. And don't forget, every step, trim your little threads from where I personally, when I thread my machine, I hold the thread for a second. It's just a habit of mine. So I always have one little spot where I need to trim my thread. Don't forget to do that. As you go through the steps, it just makes it easier at the end. Now we're going to do our next thread color change, and this is 1307. And what's going to stitch is going to be the outline of her shirt, and then her pocket on her overalls with a little accent line, and then 2 cute little dots go inside the buckles as a little accent on the buckle. So cute. Okay, she's looking so cute. Her little shirt, the pocket, and then the adorable little dots on her overall buckles are stitched. Now you might be asking, hey Brittany, my machine didn't stitch on the edge of her shirt. That is correct. You are going to, when you assemble your pincushion, have a 1/4 inch seam allowance on all 4 sides. So there's no need to stitch this bottom line of the pink or the corner of her overalls. And we didn't stitch a buttonhole stitch on the edge of her hair because it's going to go within your seam allowance. So fun little fact, that's done for a reason. So next up, we are going to change our thread color to 1177, and you guessed it, her cute green overalls are going to stitch. Alrighty, you might think she's done, but she's not quite done. She needs eyeballs, so our very last color change is to 1005 black, and she is gonna get 2 cute little circle eyeballs, and then we'll go over some tips for finishing off your pincushion. And ta-da! Let's take a look from top to bottom at all of your stitching from your embroidery machine, and she is just the cutest little girl. Oh my goodness. So now let's talk about finishing her up. So I'm gonna take her out of the hoop, and then you want to take all of your stabilizer away. So look, I never untaped her. We're gonna remove that tape, and then we're gonna pull away all of the stabilizer. Now, it's very easy, especially if you're using this Sulky Tear Easy. You're gonna pull it all the way around. So I pull all of it from the outside first, and then I go inside. Now, I can be honest with you, this particular block that we just stitched is a pin cushion. So if you wanna be a naughty girl and leave your stabilizer on the inside, it's just a pin cushion, it's okay. However, for your blocks, for your beautiful Girl Power quilt, no, take it out. So I like to have, this is my little Alex Anderson 4-in-1 essential tool. We carry this on our website. It has like a great little pokey. We're gonna use this when we turn our pin cushion right side out. I use this to kind of get a good grip or a good starting spot in tearing my stabilizer. It also has a seam ripper, our worst enemy but best friend. And then we have this for like if you need to like press your little, a quick press seam type thing. So we're going to pull the stabilizer out everywhere. Now for purposes of the video, I'm not gonna make you watch me pull all the stabilizer out. So we'll be back with the magic of camera in just a second. Okay, so now I've pulled my stabilizer out, as have you, and we are on our very last step, which is to, oh look, I said remove stabilizer after we trimmed it. Oh, well, you can remove your stabilizer or trim it, whichever one you wanna do first. It really doesn't make a difference, don't tell anybody. So now we're gonna trim it to 4 1/4 by 5 inches. So the stitch lines are that size, but I still encourage you to use a ruler. So first up, what we're gonna do, we're gonna trim these 2 lines because remember, this goes right up to the trim edge, so it just makes sense to start there. So I'm gonna start with my ruler on this side edge, and sorry, I think my head's gonna pop into view. Don't judge my gray hair. So I have my ruler lined up on the left line, the top line, and the bottom line. My left line is gonna be at the 5 inches because this is 5 inches tall. Remember, I have her turned sideways. So we're gonna do 1 cut here, off to the side. Now we're gonna do our side cut. So we are going to line this up. And this is now gonna be 4 3/4 inches from left to right because that's how wide it is. And remember, I have her turned. So just orient yourself to top and bottom and that'll make sense. Now we can start doing our measuring and trimming, right? So across, she is 4 1/4. So I'm going to, on this cut edge right here, line up with 4 1/4 and then make sure I have a straight line on the bottom. And look, it lines up perfectly with my stitch line, but I also know my cut is perfect. I really like to have things measured accurately. Now we will line up again, and this time we're going to the 5 inch line because that's our number. So there we go. This is now 4 1/4 by 5 inches. And oh my gosh, how cute is she? Now she is ready for border. So we have a series of tutorials that give you tips on cutting and doing your perfect 1/4 inch seam allowances, getting your machine set up for that. So I highly encourage you to watch those videos. They're all nice and quick, but they also are giving you in-depth information and steps through the videos. However, for this tutorial, I'm gonna do a little bit of cutting with you. So let's go back to the beginning where it tells us what to cut. We are gonna cut 1 6 1/4 by 7 inch rectangle for backing. So let's get our backing. Remember, I have starched it nicely. Where's my other ruler? I had a second ruler, you guys. Oh, here it is. I might want my long ruler. I like to have a bunch of rulers. Just fun fact about me. So my fabric is 8 inches wide, if I remember right. Yes, it is. So I'm gonna do my 7 inches this way. So first I'm gonna cut my 6 3/4. So I am gonna come over here. And now my mom is left-handed. I cut backwards probably to everybody else. So I am then going to count to 6 1/4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 3/4 over. This is going to be my 6 3/4, my initial trim line. There we go. You can also, by the way, the reason I am kind of cutting weird instead of starting at 0 and going this way is because I don't have a lot of room to stay within the camera cut for you guys. And I'm just gonna make sure that this is good and cut straight on the 6 1/4 this way. 6 3/4. Lining it up perfect. There we go. So now I know that my left and right cuts are perfect. Now we're gonna do our 7 inches. Maybe it'll make sense if I line it up from the 0. Probably make everybody happier. So I know that these 2 lines are perfectly straight. So I'm gonna line those up with my ruler. I'm gonna go past my 0 because I wanna get that a perfect cut. And over here, I wanna go past my 7. So there we go. And again, we give you tons of fabric. So you're gonna have, well, not tons, but we give you more than enough, right? So you don't have to worry and be too crazy. There's nothing worse than like feeling like you have to, like, if you make a mistake, you're just like at the end of the road. I mean, don't make too big of a mistake because we give you that much fabric, but you know what I mean. And I just kind of wiggled. Did you see that? Unwiggle, unwiggle. Alrighty, so then there we go. And again, when I am cutting, I use the lines of my ruler and the lines of my grid to make sure that everything is straight. See, because if they're perfectly lined up, then I know my ruler is perfectly straight with my fabric. Alrighty, so here is the back of my pincushion. I'm gonna set that aside. Now I need 2 pieces that are 1.5 by 5 and 2 pieces that are 1.5 by 6 1/4. So basically what I'm gonna do first is cut 4 pieces that are 1.5 inches wide. So I'm gonna come down here. I know that cut is good, but I'm gonna go a little bit further. So we have half and then a 1. I saw this funny thing on Instagram. It's like, I used to be smart and know math, and goodness gracious, is that ever true? I'm gonna come back and cut that first line perfectly straight. And then we're gonna go to 1.5. And again, there are multiple ways to cut accurately and effectively. So if you have a way, a lot of people use 2 rulers and they never use the lines on their, what do you call it, on your cutting mat. A lot of people only use 1 brand of rulers throughout an entire project and all of their quilting. I do kind of recommend that because every now and then I do think rulers are a little iffy. So it really just depends on personal preference. So if you don't like how I'm cutting, cut your way. Or maybe trying my crazy way is what you like, right? And again, you have to know, I learned how to cut from a lefty who was teaching a righty. So sometimes when I see people cut, I think they're crazy in how they're cutting. Now remember, this was my very first piece, and I wanted to make sure that my first line was gonna be perfect. So I'm coming back and cutting that right now. So we're gonna line up. Whoop, I wiggled. Don't wiggle. Another kind of ruler that everybody might like, I'm not gonna obviously show it in this video, but my mom and everybody have gotten this ruler that is, I think it's made by Sew Tights if I remember correctly, and it's the magnetic mat and the magnetic ruler, which at first I thought was gonna be silly. It's not silly, it's very helpful. So now we're gonna cut these down to 1.5 by 5. So I'm gonna line these up. And again, I've lightly starched my fabric, which makes life, in my mind, easy to cut. So we're just gonna start by cutting off an edge right here. And then I'm gonna go back 5. I really do kind of cut from right to left. I bet I'm confusing everybody with my backwards cutting. Then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, down here to the 7, because I'm starting at 12. That equals 5. I bet I'm like literally thinking I cut so backwards from everybody. It's funny. And then again, you have scraps. You never know if you do any foundation paper piecing. Like I'm making little Christmas trees right now out of foundation paper piecing, and I'm using all kinds of crazy scraps. This is perfect for a little stripe on my Christmas tree. So I'm gonna keep that. Now I'm gonna do 2 pieces at 6 3/4. And these are gonna be our top and bottom borders. So there we go. Why don't I cut from one direction for you? I'll cut at 5. I'll cut from left to right for you. And then we're going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 3/4. So right here. And again, use your lines to get everything right. If you're using 2 rulers, same thing, just make sure your lines are lining up great. Okay, so now let's talk about some assembly tips. You have everything cut. You'll want to cut your 2 pieces of batting too. You're just going to cut 2 6 1/4 by 6 1/2 inch rectangles. And I know this is silly. You might be like, why didn't you just make this square? Honestly, the proportion of it being a square just gave you a little too much white space around her. It needed to be a rectangle. So that's why. So now to assemble her, we are going to do our left and right are going to sew on just like so. And then you're going to put your top and bottom. They'll be the right length once you take into account your seam allowance. So you'll have your top and bottom right here. Again, seam allowance, seam allowance. You're going to lose an inch right here. So that'll make the top and bottom fit. Then once that's sewn together, you're simply going to take your backing. Well, you'll put your fusible on the back, the fusible batting on the back of this and on the back of this. You'll notice in the pattern, we talk about leaving a 1/4 inch all the way around your fusible batting. That's because you want to leave a 1/4 inch all the way around so that when you sew your piece together on the next step and when you turn it right side out, you don't have that bulk of the batting in your seam allowance. So pretend this is sewn together. You're simply going to put right sides together and you would stitch on 3 sides and then come in on the bottom on the left and right just a hair, a little bit, just enough so that you have space to turn it and stuff it. Now, let me show you what it's gonna look like when it's finished. It's adorable. And what we stuffed this with, this whole thing, Julie stuffed with just polyfill. You can also use wool roving. A lot of times in a pincushion, I like to use crushed walnut shells. You can find that at a pet store, and it's called lizard litter. I also get a kick out of going to a pet store and buying lizard litter. I don't know why, it just makes me giggle. But I like sometimes to do, like on this one, if I want to sit it upright, right? I would put some of that lizard litter across the bottom and then fill it with the stuffing. Or if you want this to be something that you're laying flat by your machine, you could do a layer of the polyfill and then underneath a layer of the lizard litter. So think of how you want to sit this if you want to stuff it a certain way. Or again, just put some polyfill or some wool roving in it and it's ready to go and sit by your machine. So I hope that you found these little tips helpful. Again, we have full tutorials that have Julie showing you how to cut. You might like that better. Everybody has their own way to cut and just do your way. As long as you get your piece that's an accurate size, it doesn't matter, right? I will say safety first. Always close your blade. I'm crazy about that here at the office. And then look at all the extra fabric you have left. You have a big old chunk. So keep this in your scraps. You never know what you can use this for. And then I hope that you enjoy so much your free little welcome kit. It's just meant to be a way for you to get used to like our patterns, our embroidery files. If you haven't sewn for a while, it gets you kind of back in the game and a little bit of practice before you start making your real quilt. Our very first block in the quilt, if I remember right, I hope I'm right, is the swimmer. She's adorable. It's going to be a really fun first block to start with. So I'll give you another good tutorial like this for your block 1. And then 2 through 12, you're going to be doing the same thing. Everything is so simple and numbered every month. It's going to be a breeze for you to make it. So I'll do shorter tutorials for those following months. Again, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. We give you a reminder right inside this pattern how to reach us. And then Also, in your block 1 pattern, we're going to give you a whole bunch of FAQs in that first pattern that answer questions like, oh, you need to update your credit card, or you're moving and you need to change your address, things like that, just some basics. And we also review the notions because the thread kit for this is just stunning. I opened mine. I wish I wouldn't have ripped the packaging because it was so cute, but I did. I ripped the cute little sticker open. So if you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to reach out, and happy stitching.